Shadows of the past. The old Victorian house loomed before Maria Blackwood like a decrepit sentinel, its weathered facade telling stories of decades past. As a historian specializing in unexplained phenomena, she had investigated countless properties, but something about this one made her fingers tremble as she inserted the ancient brass key into the lock. The door creaked open, releasing a musty breath of stale air. Maria's footsteps echoed through the empty hallway, each floorboard protesting beneath her weight. The beam of her flashlight danced across peeling wallpaper and dusty portraits, their eyes seeming to follow her movement. "Focus," she whispered to herself, clutching her vintage camera. The device had become something of a lucky charm during her investigations, though she couldn't shake the feeling that it had led her to this place for a reason. The study was exactly as described in the estate agent's documents, a time capsule untouched since the last family fled in 1973. Sheets draped over furniture created ghostly silhouettes in the moonlight streaming through grimy windows. But it was the wall that caught her attention, dozens of photographs arranged in a peculiar pattern. Maria approached, her trained eye scanning the images. Each showed a family of 5. Parents with 3 children spanning different decades. The earliest dated back to 1913. As she examined them closer, her blood ran cold. In each photograph, barely visible in the background, stood a dark figure. The same figure, the same position, 60 years apart. A wooden box resting on the desk drew her attention. Inside, she found several Super 8 reels, carefully labeled with dates. The first read, Summer 1973, Emily's birthday. Her hands shook as she set up the projector she had brought, knowing from experience that such films often held crucial clues. The flickering footage showed a typical family gathering, children running through a sun-drenched garden, parents laughing, cake being served. But as Maria watched, something changed. Between frames, shadows shifted unnaturally. The children's smiles became forced, fearful, and there, at the edge of the frame, the same dark figure from the photographs. The film suddenly jammed, the projector's light casting long shadows across the room. Maria turned, and for a moment, she could have sworn one of those shadows moved independently of its source. Back in her office the next day, Maria spread out her research. Property records revealed a pattern. Every 30 years, like clockwork, families disappeared from the house. Police reports mentioned missing children, distraught parents, and mysterious circumstances. But it was the map that made her hands grow cold. She had marked every location connected to the disappearances, where bodies were found, where personal belongings appeared, where witnesses reported strange sightings. Connected, they formed an ancient symbol, one she recognized from her studies of occult history. The collector's mark, she muttered, running her fingers over the pattern. According to legend, it was a sign used by entities that fed on human souls, particularly those of children. They would mark their hunting grounds with symbolic patterns, returning periodically to claim their prey. The photographs made sense now. Each family, carefully chosen. Each set of children, marked for collection. The dark figure wasn't just observing, it was selecting. Maria's computer screen flickered, and she caught a glimpse of movement in its reflection. Turning slowly, she saw the shadows in her office beginning to writhe, taking on impossible shapes. Her vintage camera, sitting innocently on the desk, started to emit a low hum. Picking it up with trembling hands, she examined it closer than ever before. There, etched into its base, was a familiar symbol, the same one she had just mapped out. The camera hadn't been leading her to these investigations. Something had been leading her through the camera. The lights in her office began to pulse, shadows stretching and contracting with each flicker. In the darkness between brightnesses, she could make out a figure, tall, impossibly thin, with eyes that seemed to swallow light itself. Maria realized with horror that she hadn't been researching the entity's pattern. She had been completing it. Every photograph she had taken, every site she had visited, every connection she had made was adding to its power. She wasn't the investigator. She was the final piece. As darkness crept in from every corner, Maria did the only thing she could think of. She raised her camera, pointed it at the approaching figure, and pressed the shutter. The flash illuminated the room for a split second, revealing the true horror of what stood before her. Then darkness fell, complete and absolute. When the police arrived the next morning, responding to reports of strange lights from Maria's office, they found only her camera, sitting on an empty desk. The last photograph in its memory showed a familiar scene, a dark figure in the background, watching, waiting. But this time, there was something different about the image. Something that made the investigating officer's blood run cold. In this photo, the figure wasn't watching the scene. It was looking directly into the lens, and it was smiling. The investigation into Maria Blackwood's disappearance remained open, filed alongside dozens of similar cases spanning back decades. Her camera was logged into evidence, where it sits to this day, waiting for the next curious soul to pick it up and continue the pattern. For in 30 years, the cycle will begin again. The shadows will stretch, the figure will emerge, and another sequence of photographs will tell a new story of horror, one frame at a time.